Hi, Greg. Nice to see you back. Hi, Rasmus, Greg, Robert. I
Hey
was about
guys.
I was about to send a message to Greg because I briefly saw you and then I thought you left the meeting. I was like, oh, maybe he's trying the other link.
Yes, so I'm confused about the so that I was just in a second ago I was in the right meeting, correct?
Yes.
Okay, because I have two different links, and I was thinking that the meeting has changed, but because one link actually requires a passcode and the other does not. Um, but now that I know that both lead to the same meeting, it's great. I can use the link without the passcode.
Yeah. The unfortunate Zoom bombing that happens with I was in a meeting that happened at Lambda some time ago, and then we have to put passcodes. So
Okay. Oh, somebody who shouldn't be there just was in the meeting, or
yeah, bots because these meetings are public.
Mhm.
Um, and they didn't have any passcodes, so bots come and they start to post a lot of stuff, music, porn videos, everything. So
Really, like in a meeting, a Zoom bot.
yeah,
That is that is cool. I didn't realize it existed. So
no, yeah,
you literally have a conversation on Zoom about whatever it is. Could be anything, right? It could be whatever. Like we have a work conversation, but could be anything. And suddenly, a virtual person appears in that meeting, and it goes like, "Hey, why don't you buy some whatever?"
yeah,
Really, like that?
yes, yes,
That is
yes,
so cool. Like, wow, we live in the 21st century. See, I used to watch movies about this when I was like a kid.
yeah. The
I want to
public
experience it.
the public Zoom meetings. I think people can just write a bot and guess the code, and once they get one that they are in, if they are allowed to share and post stuff, the bot starts sending stuff like crazy. So,
I'm gonna set up a Zoom meeting, an empty one, and post a link to it online just so I can experience it.
a honeypot Zoom.
Yes.
I recommend you to not do on the company computer, okay? And also not on the office.
Yeah. But there, do they post so bad things?
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah.
So in Poland, there was even issue that Zoom was used for school, for elementary school.
Oh.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. No, you know, but whatever it is, I like just the phenomenon of actually this happening. I realize that maybe not the kind of things I would like to be get advertised and shown, but still, it's okay. It's like if you never seen spam. Yes, the contents of spam are annoying, but if you actually want to experience the phenomenon, you can deal with it.
Yeah. All right. Okay. Um, so, Greg, since you had your PTO, we've been doing experimenting with the SDK. we did a POC branch. We think we found workaround for the majority of the issues that we are aware about, conflicting versions and things like this. So just to be very briefly, for .NET Core, it seems that's possible, even if it's indirectly. The experiments show that if we just properly version and request the NuGet package at build time with the version that we need, things work. For .NET Framework, we need some kind of redirecting, binding redirection, and we can make that work. And I think the next step that we want to investigate and be sure, and it should work too, is indirect reference. Because, for instance, if somebody bring a instrumentation from the SDK, like let's say MongoDB, this instrumentation has a reference to the MongoDB DLL.
I think it was already tested by David, and even Chris reviewed this PR with the indirect reference. Correct, Chris?
I think no, that was binding redirects, no?
Yeah, but the reference was not direct.
Oh, okay, I see.
And even
So-
Chris said that by default binding redirects are not needed. Correct, Chris?
Can you describe the scenario again?
I think the scenario was that some library was using different version of some package, of some reference, and if and we are able to like force different version of the assembly just by giving the newest version to the application, and by default the binding redirects are not needed. Like there, you said that there's some default callback. I think it's even described in the PR you were reviewing, I don't know, this week or last week. Chris, you remember or not really?
I haven't looked at, I didn't look at a PR last
Or
week.
maybe it was it you. I know it was from Datadog. It was
I think it was Lucas that mentioned.
yeah, it was Lucas, correct.
Yeah.
So maybe I'll just send a hyperlink to this PR.
Yeah, but the important thing is that we think that we have workarounds and recipes, and there will be limitations with that. One, like Chris pointed, for instance, in certain scenarios that DevOps don't have the build access to the application, then we can't do this stuff. But it seems that is a path that we can take to start to get some synergy with the SDK, so we can try to move the project a bit faster. Because I think the challenge that we are facing is that no one of us can take a dependency on the project right now because the project is not ready. And so we keep being pulled for stuff that end up taking higher priority because the project's not being used right now. So this will be kind of a tentative to accelerate stuff and gets us to the point that we can start to really use it. I know that in the initial roadmap, we talked about a different path, but I think this path with the SDK, at least for the workarounds that we're seeing, is looking promising from what we tried, and we would like to keep driving into that direction.
And in a high level, in a nutshell, so it's about referencing the SDK libraries, or is it what is it specifically?
It's using the SDK as the tracer, let's say, because we know these problems and limitations about the versions. We know that requires build.
But when we say using the SDK as a tracer, I don't quite understand.
Instead of injecting when we do the startup, instead of starting the Datadog tracer, we start the SDK.
Okay.
You know, and we listen the activities, we generate activities instead
Okay.
of generate the internal span type. You know.
Got it. So, so we still do IL instrumentation.
Yes. Still do IL instrumentation.
Okay.
Well, both actually. It's the prototype does both IL instrumentation and leveraging some of the instrumentations produced for the SDK.
Gotcha. So when it's activities, then of course it doesn't need to do anything, and then IL instrumentation injects activities.
Yes. We have
Got
an example on the POC branch, like the MongoDB is IL instrumentation, bytecode instrumentation.
Mhm.
But as Chris mentioned, for instance, the ASP.NET Core comes from let me call source instrumentation that uses diagnostic listener, but the fact that it's diagnostic listener doesn't matter.
Mhm.
Whatever the source produces the activity, we listen to that. You know.
Yes.
So,
Yes.
So the POC covers both scenarios.
So let me please repeat what I understood and let me know if it's correct. So we use IO instrumentation to generate to emit activities, and then we can use the part of the SDK that collects activities and sends them to do exactly that. Got it. We just need to load that part of and like make sure that that part of the SDK is actually loaded.
Yes.
Okay. And we do that by doing what?
We basically, if you look at the code of the SDK, basically has a bootstrap section, and we use the loader code, but instead of calling the tracer, we call the bootstrap code from the Hotel SDK.
But and then there is the versioning problem. If the application is already using the SDK, then
the way that we handle that is the following. Because the SDK is for producing the traces, not to log the activity, we have the OpenTelemetry API to instrument libraries, and applications use the SDK to actually produce, to listen the activities, capture, and actually export them.
yes.
We can inject the SDK, but in the POC clearly became obvious.
Sorry, you're breaking up. We can use the SDK and then suddenly you froze.
Okay. Sorry, I'm in my house. My connection is bad.
Sorry, yeah, no worries.
Robert, can you explain that?
Yes, I can try, but I was also looking at other things. I cannot share my screen. It will be easier.
So Greg, to answer your question, while we're getting that sorted out, I believe what's being said is that the application, so what's been proved out so far is when the application is not directly referencing the SDK itself. And instead, so that way we don't have multiple instances of the SDK being loaded into memory. And so any instrumentation is done through the API, which is through diagnostic source.
Yeah.
And there's a set of plugins that the groups proved out to where if you want to do some customizations or some vendor specific things, there's a way to execute certain code within the application, but it's through a separate type of plugin.
So telemetry is emitted through SDK, through the OTel API, which is one small NuGet. Now, if but that API goes through to essentially diagnostic source, right? So that means if we do ILs, if a library like a SDK for, I don't know, some remote invocation, right? If it emits its own telemetry, then we're good. It already sends activities or diagnostic source events. We can just collect them, no problem. Now, if a library does not produce telemetry, we want to use IL instrumentation to essentially call into diagnostic source.
Correct.
Either directly or through some version of the OTel API. In fact,
Correct.
that one we can vendor in, and then we don't have a versioning conflict. So that's good. And now, in terms of collecting and sending that telemetry, like exporting it, I should say, if the application does not use or reference the OTel SDK, no problem. We can have our own kind of vendored inversion. And if it does that, so the two interesting parts are what happens when an application already references diagnostic source, because we need to ship our own version of diagnostic source, and there could be a versioning conflict there, which we need to, like, there is a solution for it, it's just that we need one. And the second one is when an application already has reference to the OTel SDK, that is also solvable. And I can make a suggestion if we don't have a solution. If we do, then great. If we don't have, I can make a suggestion of how to do this.
Right now, our solution is just to ask, like, force, like, you know, troubleshooting is like, please use the same version, like include the same versions. So for like just to speed up, but in future we can just, you know, instrument the code to the SDK and to the diagnostic source, so everything goes to the vendor version. Correct? I think that's what Java does.
Yes, exactly.
And the mapping and yeah.
So for exporting, for collecting and exporting, exactly like you say, because the SDK there is, it's not an exchange type, it's a worker type. So we can essentially just instrument to use the vendor version. The complicated challenge is for the diagnostic source library itself, because that's an exchange type. We can't make it use the vendor in version. Just we have to rewrite a lot of things, and for that I just sent a link in the chat. So that basically is a working thing for not activities. I think I mentioned this in the past. I'm not sure whether I ever ran a demo, but it's open source now. So it creates a wrapper around diagnostic source, and the same way. So it loads the library dynamically, and it exposes only APIs for diagnostic source. We can add more APIs for activities as we need them. So what it does, it allows the IL instrumentation to always use, you always would use the wrapper that is in this library that I just linked. So the wrapper does the following: if the application references diagnostic source, so it's loaded, then it forwards all calls to the part, to the diagnostic source that came with the application. And if the application doesn't reference diagnostic source, then it forwards all calls to the vendor version. And then it does, it watches libraries being loaded. So if something is loaded late, it dynamically switches from one to the other. The result of it is that if anything that emits IL, if all our instrumentation uses this wrapper instead of diagnostic source directly, it will all just work with diagnostic source and activities as well, right? So it will glue together in common stacks.
I think you showed the demo to us some time ago.
Yeah, I can't remember what I showed the demo, but if I did, then yeah. Okay,
Yeah.
cool.
No. I do remember, but it's good to revisit. But what we've been kind of leaning, at least in the short term, is to kind of using these either the project is specifying a specific NuGet package version, or the binding redirects. We kind of work around this version problem, because the application is then deployed with the version that we need. So then we have the versions consistent,
If you
it does-
have, if the application doesn't have diagnostic source, then we deploy one, right? Or
Yes.
how?
Yes.
Okay.
And if the application has and conflicts version, what we can do, there are, depend on the scenario, but typically, for instance, you can add the reference for .NET Core. If you add a reference to the NuGet package, even if it's a library, a third-party library down in the chain, the version resolution is going to do the following. Hey, I have this is my first reference to the diagnostic source. I'm going to pick up the application. The application doesn't need to write code using it, but it needs to reference. And then it pulls the version that we need, And
But then
that
you still touch the, if I understand correctly, you still need to touch the application.
you
Correct.
need to touch the build of the application. That's correct.
Right, which is just a short-term strategy to be able to test things out.
Okay.
And I would say that most of the scenarios with OpenTelemetry, people have been kind of building from the sources. They have access to the build. What scenario doesn't have, I think Chris that brought that up some time ago, is kind of the DevOps scenario that they do deployments and they don't have access to the project itself to build. In that case, this workaround proposal doesn't work out of the box.
I've seen that scenario actually super often. Because if you have access to the application, you can sort of do what Application Insights does, which is they still don't rewrite IO. You're right, but you can. Yeah, if you sorry, never mind. It's just a matter of deployment then. Never mind.
Yeah. So when we have the project, I think we have the workarounds. We understand that we don't have the workarounds for the case that you are getting let's say, a package with the application. You are not building. We don't have the solution. Then we need something like the stuff that you did. But I think that for us to get started and get the momentum to get some people to use, we should take this route, because that allows us to kind of gain some dependence on the project,
Okay.
So
Okay.
then we can invest more,
Yeah.
There is also one more exception. The application must not ship newer version diagnostic source than we required. Otherwise, it's not picking up the new APIs.
So you're talking about the case that the application is ahead of us.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I think so. Yeah, I think it should be possible to, because with this plan we are rewriting IL instrumentations, not the engine for IL instrumentations, but the actual instrumentations, right? Like the integration code, because they used to the one that previously emitted spans would now emit diagnostic source event or activities, right? So, 'cause that work needs to happen anyway, correct? As we do this, and I'm guessing, please let me know, that we want to emit activities, not diagnostic source events.
Yes, activities.
Yeah, that makes sense. So the challenge so basically the plan makes sense to me. It's just this aspect because the story at Microsoft that happened is that essentially initially the bet was that enough people touched the application, and then the big kind of issue was that the learning was known. There is the market for like the DevOps scenario is essentially almost bigger, and like in a very long term, people will of course touch every application, but by the time it happened, vendors who support the non-touched application scenario will be controlling the market essentially. So it may be a matter of time estimation, because you're right. If we can move the project forward by doing what you described, that may be just a good compromise. I would say we could spend some number of days, not weeks, looking at this wrapper and deciding. So right now, if we
I have
want
also
to
one question. This is something that do not know if it's possible, but probably you know. Is it possible to do another approach that just doing the IL rewrite to use different reference of a library? So we will just force the application to load the diagnostic source that we want, that we ship.
Well, if the application itself uses a version that is more forward, then we would break the application.
Of course.
So you don't want to do that.
But if the application works something newer, then the wrapper would not work as well, right? Because it will not support the new API.
It will. So what the wrapper does, so Microsoft won't break backward compatibility. So the wrapper notices that there is a more forward version, forwards all close to that.
I see.
So if we wanted to do diagnostic source, not activities, then the wrapper is ready. We can use it today with essentially, as we're rewriting the IL integrations, it's same effort, doing it via the wrapper or directly calling diagnostic source. It's ready. And all the right APIs are there, and there are actually examples of how to do this. I also linked them. For activities, there is like the wrapper loads the same library, but there is no actually wrapping APIs for activities. Now, if we wanted to wrap all activity APIs, that's a project that I would estimate takes several weeks. But I don't know how many of the activity APIs actually need to have a wrapper. It could be that it's literally 2 or 3 or 5, or I don't know. In that case, it could be an effort of like one sprint to add those by simply doing, copying the same stuff that we do for diagnostic source, just calling to activity instead. It's up to you guys because you're working on it more. But I would encourage you to spend a couple of days just investigating, because if it's viable, then it could be essentially you like avoid this problem and you immediately address the DevOps people as well. And if not, then you know that it's then you have just gained some clarity there.
Just for me to understand the trade-off here, because on that path there, the main difference, basically we change the reference because the thing will look and behave as an activity, right? So the instrumentation basically looks the same. It doesn't look different. Minus some using statement somewhere, but basically
No, it's not exactly the same. It's very similar because let me see if I can open this demo here and share my screen. And the last time I looked at it is several weeks ago, so actually several months ago probably. So I hope I can, but let me share my screen, which is what is the right? 1 second, what's right here? Do you see my browser window now? Yes.
yes.
Hello? Yeah. Okay. So oops. I'm just looking for where do I have I'm not sure where the code is for. I can't remember where I have the code, but of the example somewhere in this project. But maybe it's direct. No, I won't stop here. So it's very similar to the code, but it's not identical. You have to explicitly like do things like no, I don't want to waste the time now. So I can send I can find the method after the meeting and send a pointer to the chat. But it's essentially the same structure. It's equivalent. Every API has a different name, but it's a similar name. It's like has a stub in it or something. So if your question is, can we write it for the one and then change it, and whether it's easy? Yes, it is easy, but it's not a no-op.
So I think that segues into a question that I was going to bring up, which is related to a document that Robert shared a couple weeks ago, where it talks about how we can use a similar API within the IL instrumentation and source space instrumentation to do instrumentation. And I think what this leads to is that when we're doing IL-based instrumentation, we'll likely want to have an API layer, an abstraction layer in there, where we can then handle any mapping logic or future changes to how we need to manage these different dependencies, whether we're using the forwarding stub that Greg's talking about, or whether we're using the activity API directly.
Well, the thing is, the forwarding stub is sort of already that layer. You could have an additional layer of indirection, or you can, to simplify, essentially.
Yeah, it's just a question of timing, I think, of when we decide, what order we decide to do things.
But designing that API is essentially also time. So you could take the thing, design the API, but like, for example, the way this is written, right? First, there was this API, and I was statically referencing diagnostic source and calling directly into it. And then you sort of swap the for example, if you already create this API, then you have to think about how this API looks like so that it can be generic. So, for example, the vendor version is already baked into this library, right? You remember, Apollo, we did this together. So you could do the activities right now, like exactly what you say. You create this layer, but for the activities, it always uses the vendored inversion, or you can statically reference and always use the latest version, whatever you prefer. And then later you swap it for dynamic loading. That would probably be the least effort. Otherwise, you spend time designing exactly the same API, creating another layer. But up to you.
Yeah, I would think that the API design is already in place given what the activity API is. And so, which is basically what you did. You took the existing API shape and reused it, and then you eventually just swapped out which version of it you were using ultimately.
Yeah, it's just the API. Let me see.
It's just a slightly different invocation or something like
exactly.
that. Right?
It's very, very similar. It follows exactly the same structure as the original API, but it can't be the same because you need to say, dear stub, give me an activity, and then so give me an activity wrapper. You can't just go and new up an activity, if you see what I mean, right? Yep. So it follows the pattern, but it's not exactly the same. So there is API design in it. And if you do another layer, then essentially you go like, dear wrapper of the generic thing, give me the generic thing. So essentially do exactly the same logic, just one more layer. And then what I'm saying is, because stub is already a wrapper, just do the API, but delay the implementing of the dynamic part of it, and have the stub just always give you the static thing. That is better than doing the stub of the stub, because then you end up with an additional layer that may seem like a shortcut now, but once you're done, it's just like a mess of layers and layers, and nothing is as permanent as temporary things. So that's what I'm saying.
So I think for the short term, this is an important question about what we wanna do down the road for this scenario. But I think before we tackle that, but as long as we don't start to tackle a bunch of IL instrumentations, I would like kind of to wrap up the POC with the two things that I mentioned before, and it seems that one is done, and collect that information. And then we decide about this next step. So we have time to look at Greg's prototype, understand a little bit better the DevOps scenario. One thing that I don't have any feeling for that. This is totally based on my experience. I didn't encounter that scenario as much, but I know Chris already mentioned, so he already encountered. Greg already mentioned, he already encountered. So I would like us to think about and try to dig if this is kind of a legacy scenario that still exists and it's worth the investment or not. And once more, I'm saying this based on my experience, but I don't encounter that recently in any scenario, you know. So the cases that I encounter, people do have access to the project, and I want to avoid us taking a costly path, perhaps and we, to be fair, we probably don't have a good way to measure that, but I would like to kind of think if it's really a scenario that we must support, you know, or if it's something that perhaps something that happened in the past, but if we take an approach that let's look to the future, in especially that activity is part of the runtime, kind of what makes sense for us to invest on that. So I will try to wrap up these last steps for the POC, and then perhaps when we get back next week, we try to get some information about this scenario, and depending on what we access about this scenario, we decide about the path regarding the IL instrumentation, you know.
Yeah, that works good. Just to add a little bit on top, because there are separate questions that you touched on. I think it would be good to kind of underline the difference here. So the what we call DevOps scenario, right? And I don't have numbers to show right now, but I'm just sharing experience. Will we be able to address a significant market, ignoring this issue and saying it's not supported? Yes, we will. However, which market is bigger? The one that DevOps scenario market or the touched application market? I think they are maybe either roughly the same size, or the DevOps market is bigger.
Yeah, there's another factor to that too, Greg, that I don't have an answer for, but it's just a nuance to it. Which market is more willing to leverage something like OpenTelemetry?
Both. People go, we want OpenTelemetry, and they don't want to touch the applications. They want to install OpenTelemetry tools. They go like, oh, we have like, they don't understand this as deeply as we do. They go like, we want standardization. We don't want to commit to some sort of vendor specific thing, but we just can't touch our application.
Yes, but at the same time, OpenTelemetry is in a state of where some things are pre-release and some things are GA. And so that's where I've seen hesitancy between different segments. And so that's where I don't have a good answer.
Yeah. So I guess what I tried to say is, when we talk about IO instrumentation, there is kind of, if we go on a high level, why are we even doing this? Why are we here, and why is this decay not enough? There is a couple of things that are all important but very distinct, and we should not mix them up. One is, some libraries just are not producing telemetry. And that's a big problem. And in some long-term future, it might go away, but it's going to be a long time until then. And then there is another distinct problem that is also huge, and that's the DevOps scenario problem, right? People want to take the application, do some magic to the infrastructure, and have telemetry. And the market for this is gigantic, and especially large corporations. I think it's totally okay to address only one of these two things, but we should be kind of explicit and really focused and clear about what we're addressing, what we're not addressing, and what we are missing out on.
Yeah, one thing, that's perhaps a little bit of confusion with the term, but I see people claiming teams that I worked with saying, hey, I'm not touching the code at all. But they really mean source code, you know. And I think what I'm calling DevOps scenario, just to be sure, is people that are not even talking about touching their build, you know.
It's sort of often like, if I'm rebuilding without a change of sources or not, it's like.
Yeah, no, but I think it's good to make the distinction, you know, because I think there are all the two cases. As I said, I don't have a clue about numbers. I can tell that the experience personal that I have is people that, okay, I don't want to touch code. They are very vocal about it. But if I tell to them to change stuff in the build or their deployment, they take it, you know. But it's a different scenario that somebody that is not going to touch the building, you know. So I think we want to cover the zero touch source code in any case. The build case that I'm calling that I don't want to touch even the build is that special case that we need to come to kind of a decision about how we are going to approach that. Are we going to go the route of having the stub and handle that case too? Or are we going to kind of say that that's not a scenario that we cover? I don't know.
I think because we can, there's a difference of saying we want to get to some market soon. So we do want to cover the DevOps scenario, but later. That's one thing. Or we can say, actually, we not part of, like, not at all. Because if we do that, we will, and I know we don't have numbers, so it's just a matter of perspective. Like, again, to me, this we will significantly reduce the addressable number of people, because like touching the build but not touching the code, that means you touch your build scripts. That means like really you're touching your code, like blah. We don't have data, so let's leave it there. But clear that we don't fully understand the amount of people there. But the thing is, if we explicitly say no DevOps, we suddenly offer ourselves a lot of new options for designs, right? We can say, well, now that we can touch our build, that we must touch our build, do we really need runtime instrumentation? Why don't we take the library being referenced by the application, rewrite the IL in place, like of that library, make it emit telemetry. We can inspect what is being referenced. We can make it reference new things, and rewrite the IL, repackage the application. Done. Like nothing being touched at runtime. That's neat. Probably comes with some disadvantages as well, but in a scenario where we know that that application must be touched, like the build of the application must be touched, suddenly we have lots of options. And this is just an example, right?
Yes.
So
can I just interrupt? I think that we together, like as a whole SIG, we should not be against Greg your proposition. Personally, I was not even against. I just think that it's something that should be in plan, but we should not focus like as an immediate step, because it will just, we'll lose a lot of velocity to get any feedback, even from ourselves, touching with the build scenario. But in my opinion, we should address this DevOps scenario. We do not have to do it we do not have to do it on our own. I mean, like for example, Splunk, anyone can contribute and do it. But I think it should be part of the plan, at least like, as an acceptable thing in the vision. We could state that it is an acceptable plan. That I think that we should not, strike through this option that we will do this kind of mapping, this bridge, this wrapper, or how we want to call it, this vendoring stuff. I do not see any way it should basically do any harm.
Yeah. I just want to make sure that we don't lose the strategy for the tactics. But
I don't know, Paulo, do you agree, or Chris?
Yeah, no, I agree. I think I was mentioning kind of the most extreme case, kind of we support or we not support, but also there is the kind of in between kind of we are enabling this for this scenario right now, but then we address the other scenario in the next step. I just want to be sure that we need to solve that when we get to the step of touching the IL instrumentations. We are going to make those to depending on activity. We're gonna make this depend on, let me call stub. If you don't like the name, Greg, I'm gonna, for now, I'm gonna use stub, but
No, whatever. Yeah.
they stub. So how we are gonna do that part, you know? So for the POC right now, we just wrote one. It's fine. It's just to prove the concept, really. So it's totally fine. But the question, when we get to that point, then we need to have a clear picture about what we want to go. Even perhaps even if you are not doing at first, then we are writing it prepared to eventually have the stubs in place, you know. So even if the first stub version that we ship actually uses activity, but then we have
Yeah,
the
I think we
stub.
should. I think we should do it, Paulo, because it will make this. It will make the then implementation of the stub Euler writing easier.
Yeah.
So a small adapter.
Yes.
If you do an adapter, up to you. I think it makes sense. You don't want to over-engineer it now. You want to do it step by step. My recommendation, and it's very soft recommendation, please feel free to do it in any other way, is to look closely at the existing stub API. It's all done for everything that is diagnostic source directly rather than activity. It's done, tested, and ready to go right now. So if you wanted to emit diagnostic source telemetry rather than activity telemetry, you could start doing it full on today dynamically with the stubbing. If you look at how they, I sent after the meeting some links to the chat. I would look at it. I would create a stubbing API for activity that follows the same pattern in terms of API design, with whatever tweaks you feel needed to be made. But just look at what we have right now, and have it call directly activity statically, right? The thing is, as you do this, use as few activity APIs as possible, but as many as necessary. Whenever you feel like you could actually avoid using an activity API, maybe it's slightly less need, but you can avoid using it, do avoid it, don't stub it. And then by the time you're finished, you know exactly which activity APIs need to be stubbed and which don't. And then this whole complexity that we chatted a while back about IDs, do we need to map all the IDs to new IDs, all of the stuff may not even be a thing because we get away without it. Or maybe not, I don't know. But by doing this way, we know exactly what needs to be stubbed and what doesn't. And then the whole stubbing effort is much better defined.
It makes sense to me. Yeah. So, okay, I think we had a bug about something that's not building. I'm changing the topic, right? But we had a bug. It was the only new issue that we had, and the build is falling. I have to look.
So is this regarding the what is it? Style cop errors?
Yeah, the end with a
So
single new line character, it's all about that.
So it looks like some of the files were updated in a PR, and Robert and I approved it. But it looks like there's still a test file that's missing a new line that's causing the breakage. So I was going to ask if we wanted to just merge the PR as it is, and then we'll do a follow-up PR to get that next file updated.
You don't want to update this branch?
Are we able to directly update that branch?
If it's usually enabled by default when you make a contribution to an open source repo.
Okay, so you can still update somebody else's branch?
Usually by default, yes.
Okay. I wasn't sure about that.
Yeah, so let's update the branch and merge them. So we got rid of that. All right. Anything else? It was a lot of things, so. All right, so gonna try to, as I said, try to wrap up the stuff for the POC before next meeting. And then we can perhaps continue the discussion or start a more basic discussion about what happens next regarding the IL instrumentation itself.
And I will send you some links so that you can take a look at stuff. So.
Yeah, by the way, I'm not a scribe, so I try to take very short notes and link stuff. If you have a chance, guys, later take a look at the doc and add any notes that you guys think it's relevant, you know. I pay attention to the conversation. I can type while I'm paying attention to the conversation. So, all right then. Bye everyone. Nice to see everyone.
Talk to you soon. See you guys.